Hello, welcome back to English 111. We've got a busy week ahead of us, so I'll try to keep this short. I don't know, once I start talking, who knows how long I'll go. But I'll bear in mind, you got things to do, I got things to do. But I do want to say this before I start kind of giving you an overview of this week's activities. Good for you for showing up. That's the hardest thing to do, especially when we're not meeting in the old school way of actually going to campus and meeting as a group 2 or 3 times a week. That puts a lot more on you, right? You have to be self-disciplined and focused and be the boss of you. And so good for you for doing it. I think showing up is either way, right? Either online or going to class the old-fashioned way, but carving out the time and the kind of mental space and focus to do this. That's the hardest thing, and you're doing it, so keep doing it. We got a lot to do this week. I'm asking you to read a couple things out of our textbook, our reader, but they're both about writing. One is about the writing process, and one is about particularly some advice on writing a narrative descriptive essay, because I'm asking you here, spoiler alert, I'm asking you to write a narrative, personal narrative essay for this first paper. So these 2 readings just give a little bit of advice, and I want you to, they're both short, but they've got a lot of information. And I want to focus this week on the idea of the writing process. Because when I was where you are as a student a long, long time ago, I got a paper assignment and would basically just think about it for a couple weeks until the deadline for the final draft of the paper was due. And then the night before, bam, I'd sit down and crank something out and hope it was okay. And it was okay because I got through it, so mission accomplished. But man, there are times when I'd like to go back in time and just smack young Bossing upside the head and say, tell him there's a better way. So I guess there's a better way than the way I did it. And that is the writing process, right? That is breaking down this big thing, paper 1 assignment, into much smaller and more manageable and much more doable, smaller jobs spaced out over 3 weeks. And that's kind of what we're doing. Because I'm a real believer that it works, and it's the best way of you doing your best work for this class. And that work getting the best grade. So I think it's worth your time and attention, and maybe buy-in, right? The process is basically what we'll be doing for this week is kind of the generating ideas and words part, just the kind of raw information creation. Then next week will be kind of the drafting process, where we'll take what you created this week and start shaping it into the academic essay formula. Then the last part of the process is just kind of like refining it, polishing it up, editing, revising, proofreading. All of that comes in the last week of the process. But I think if we can get that practice of the writing process in our minds and putting it in action starting this week, it'll serve you well. It'll serve all of us well, because what I'll be grading 3 weeks from now will be so much easier and more pleasant for me to grade, right, than something you threw together at the last second that you're not very happy with, and that I have to spend a lot extra time on explaining why it's not as good as it really could be, right? So it's a win-win if the writing process works for you, and I hope it will. the first journal is the first part of the writing process. So what the first writing homework I'm asking you to do is basically this thing called free writing, where you take an idea, or in this case, a memory, and just crank out as much words in as focused amount of time as possible. This process, this idea of free writing has been around for a long time. I first came across it in this book called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. When I was teaching a creative writing class many years ago, we would do this. We would do this exercise that she has in this book at the beginning of every class, just to get the wheels turning, just to get the creativity going. And I'm asking you to try it here. And her idea is super simple. And the idea is basically that in our minds, we have kind of two sides, right? There's one that's the creative side, the kind of artistic, mysterious, free association kind of side that always has something to say about whatever. It's the side that a lot of times when we're texting or when we're emailing or messaging or whatever, or just sitting around, shooting the breeze, right? That's that side. Unedited, unfiltered, just here's right off the top of my head what I'm thinking about this, or what I remember about this, or this great story of something that happened to me that I just have to share. That's the side we need right now, this week, right? The other side of the brain is the editor brain, right? And we'll need that too, but we don't need it for another week or two, right? This week, we need the creative side. And her theory is that when we face like writer's block or even like writing anxiety, a lot of times it's because the editor side wants to like jump line and get be at the have the prominent position right at the beginning of the writing process, when we need the editor side to shut up and let the creative side do its work. Have its fun, play with language. But the editor side jumps in and says, no, that's a stupid idea, or no one's going to be interested in that story, or that word's misspelled. Why don't you stop, take a break, come back later, whatever, right? We need to quiet the critical part of our brain and let the creative part of our brain go. And so this free writing exercise and all these kind of like rules or suggestions is a way of doing that, of allowing the creative side to have its fun, do its play, and shut the creative side of our brains up. So it's really simple. Set a time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. Once you start, you don't stop. That's the only real rule, is you're cranking out words on the screen, right? Even if those words have nothing to do with the task at hand, which is say everything you can remember about this one event, this one time. Maybe it's a series of events where you felt like the other or the stranger or left out or different from the people or a person that you encountered, right? We've all had those times. And I want you to just literally be the researcher of your own life. This is a paper where you don't have to do any research, really, except research your own memory. And it can be any event that kind of fits under that larger umbrella of when I was considered different, or when I felt myself to be different or othered. That's what I'm looking for. Once you start, you don't stop. Even if the words are like, this is the lamest thing I've ever done, I can't wait for 20 minutes to be over, bossing's a jerk for making me do this and turning it in, whatever the words are, let those come out. Once the flow starts, maybe you can get back. I use the trigger word, the phrase "I remember." So when I'm doing this, and I do this for my own writing, if it's a memory that I'm trying to come up with, I'll trigger myself back or anchor myself, not trigger, anchor. My anchor phrase is "I remember." And so I'll throw that in when I'm done kind of complaining about having to sit here. I remember I remember the smell of the diesel fuel on that bus. I remember the people talking in a language I didn't understand. I remember looking out the window and seeing my own very pale reflection on a bus full of people that looked nothing like me. Whatever the memory is, as soon as you can ground it into memory and images and emotions, right? You're describing both the outward events, what people said to you, what people did to you, those actions and words, but you're also wanting to kind of bring back up, pull back up out of memory the emotions and thoughts you had, right? The inner workings of that memory of when you were the other. That's just as important, right? You're trying to capture the outer and the inner experiences. And the other thing to remember is you are free to be as bad at this as you want to be, right? You're free to write the worst 20 minutes worth of writing that has ever been created in the history of humankind, and that's all right. All you got to do is focus on quantity. Put words on the page or on the screen. Try to get a page worth of writing, or a couple pages if you're double spacing, or if you can go longer than that, get 2 or 3, because that just makes next week easier. The more raw material you can generate now, the easier it will be to take that raw material and refine it and shape it like a sculptor into its most perfect form of the academic essay and, carefully organized paragraphs. We'll worry about that in a bit. But right now it's just raw material, quantity over quality, and I promise you when I'm grading it, I'll just be looking to see that you did it. Right? I might look to see what you're writing about just out of curiosity, but if you do it, you get points for it. So no pressure or low pressure. So give that a shot. The first journal is basically the result of that free writing exercise. Then you'll notice that there's a folder that has paper 1 documents in it. It'll have the assignment and a bunch of other stuff that will be more relevant in the next couple weeks. But when you look, it'll give a pretty detailed description of what I'm asking you to do, including kind of the breakdown of the writing process into steps, into kind of 4 steps. So let that be your guide. There are also questions to consider, kind of ways of me gently nudging you towards focusing on a particular event and how to write about it. You don't have to answer each of those questions to consider, right? Unless you want to, unless that kind of helps you with your free writing exercise, then shoot. Anything that helps, do. But those are just kind of to kind of focus your memory or focus your thinking. Use it if it helps. If it doesn't help, don't use it. The other information is just kind of the general requirements, so check that out. The last thing on the assignment are due dates, right? So essentially what I'm doing is saying for the next 3 weeks, here's what you'll be turning in. I'm breaking that writing process down into homework assignments, basically. So by the end of the writing process, the final assignment is turning in the final draft of the paper. So if you have any questions after you read through that document, you could look at some example papers that I put in. After you look at the documents, particularly the assignment, if you got any questions at all, just shoot me an email or hit me a text up on Teams, and we can talk during this week or next week. Then the rest of the folder is basically advice and guidance for taking the raw material that you've created and starting to shape it, trying to organize it into a narrative, right? Into an actual story, beginning, middle, and end, before, during, or after. It gives you advice on that. I think I put in a couple examples of some introductions to some rough drafts, not because I want you to turn in an introduction, but I just want you to see what other people have written about and how they've started their drafts, so you can kind of see what other people have done. And then there's a really good video. I hope you take time to watch it about writing anxiety, because we all face it, right? Nobody, well, very few people just naturally just love to dive into a new writing project, because it's a complicated process. It's a complicated mental task that you're doing, and there's consequences to the the final product. So I really appreciate that video on writing anxiety and some ways that we can mediate it and control it in ourselves. The final journal is essentially to take the raw material that you wrote in the first of the week's journals and giving it more organization and more shape. So even at the very beginning of the process, I'm asking you to revise. Or you might decide, this thing I wrote earlier just isn't really going to work now that I know what the paper's asking. The second assignment could be just you rebooting and doing a whole new, crafting a whole new memory, a whole new story that you're going to tell. So you've got a lot of mental work to do and some writing work to do this week. So I'm going to stop talking now. But if you have any questions, let me know. And I want to let you know that you should not doubt yourself. You're right where you're supposed to be in this class. You have the skills and the experience to make a really successful first paper and have a really successful semester. So, no doubt. I don't doubt it. You shouldn't doubt it. That's all I've got for now. Work hard. Be kind. I'll see you back here soon, okay? Take care.